I never wanted the kids to feel like, oh, we just play six man and blah, blah, blah. I want them to feel like, hey, it's a legitimate program. You're getting preparation. We're going to put the time in to help you be the best you can be. I always felt like that gave a little bit of that, hey, you're not missing something by not going to like a huge school and playing 11 man. But I always felt like, hey, we're going to give you a good amount of prep and we're going to push you and you're going to lift weights and do all these kinds of things. I think, they start to take more ownership and you see them really grow and blossom on the mental side of it as well as the physical.
Hi, I'm Bradley Tarpey, and welcome to the Six Man Spotlight. Today's guest is multi-time state champion coach Jason Reimers. In Coach Reimers' time in Texas, he served as the offensive coordinator for the Emory Jaguars from 2013 to 2017, and as the head football coach and assistant athletic director from 2018 to 2021. During this time, the Jaguars won 3 state championships, 2 of which with Coach Reimers as the head coach. After relocating from the Houston area, Coach Reimers has worked as the offensive coordinator for Gloria Deo Academy in Bulverde, Texas, where he has played a pivotal role in their growth as a football program. Coach Reimers joins me today to talk their unique brand of offense, which I've termed six-man pro-style spread, and an inside look at their in-season practice structure. For your convenience, I've attached a link to a folder with a number of practice plans, calendars, scouting reports, and a program overview shared by Coach Reimers to the six-man community. I hope that you'll enjoy that resource. Now let's get into the conversation. It's fun catching up, man. It's funny the way that life takes us. I don't know if you remember, but back when you were at Emory, even before like the big, beautiful stadium was built, I remember coaching like a middle school football game against each other. And I don't know, that ended up turning into a couple years later, a game in the semifinals to go to the state championship. But it's just funny how life works. It's cool to now be here having this conversation. And I'm just excited to have you on and sort of, let you share all this knowledge that you have of the game.
No, I appreciate you having me. No, a lot of good times, competing against you guys. Always had a lot of respect for y'all and the way you do things. And I can remember looking when we joined TAPS of, okay, we're going to be in a district. We've got Pasadena First Baptist, and we're talking like, they played them in the past. They've never been that good. They got a new coach coming in from Washington, and like, are they going to know much about six man? And man, y'all came out running power and boot and running it well. And so we knew like, man, because we didn't play till the end of the season, but we knew we were going to be in for a game here. And little did we know, right? We'd have several of them over the years. Still going.
Yeah, we had some more
this day.
Yeah. It's fun times. Well, like I was telling you, I'm really fascinated with what you've kind of always done offensively. And, when Coach Adrian Adams went to Allen Academy, it sort of felt like y'all's system of offense sort of exploded in the Houston area. There was like 4 or 5 schools doing y'all's unique brand. And even, when Coach Adams left Emory and you became the head coach, it was interesting to see that you didn't necessarily do this wholesale change. So I was just curious if you could sort of share with the audience, a little bit about the system that you guys run, sort of, I guess, what led you to sort of stick with it, even through a head coaching change, and I guess just sort of what you like about that offense.
No, sure. So, I came in brand new to six man in, I guess it was 2013, and we were still playing independent, and we ran strictly diamond, and we had a pretty big roster, about 30 guys. And up until that point, and even that first year, everybody pretty much just played one way. We had like one guy that maybe played both sides a little bit, but, playing an independent, sometimes, they were running through teams. That was one thing, and then just keeping guys fresh and, teaching them one thing and that sort of thing with, all the Jewish holidays and the things that we had. Sometimes practice time could be limited. So they felt like that was best. And then later, as we transitioned into TAPS, we started to have guys playing both for sure, and some guys doing it heavily, but they had always been straight diamond. And so, as I was telling you, trying to find resources when I first came in to learn was kind of tough, just the big old green book with old O'Brien and Veer and things like that. But I really liked the diamond. It was really kind of cool and different, obviously from an 11-man offensive, standpoint. And so I learned that a lot, credit to Coach Adams and all the coaches there that helped me kind of learn my way on the second exchange and everything that was going on. So we ran that. We had a really good spread back that kind of fit that well. But then when he graduated, we had a guy coming up from JV, David Kleban, who you probably remember, and he was not a traditional spread back. He was like a drop back pocket guy, traditional 11-man type of quarterback. And so Coach Adams had seen an offense, I think it was from a school in Marble Falls, that was probably long gone from six man, but they ran a package where they brought a guy in motion and ran basically a jet sweep. And they had a couple different things they did off of that. So that's kind of how it started. It was like, hey, we can run a jet, we can fake the jet and run a dive, which we called counter, and just kind of block it like dive up front. And then we had a stretch counter jailbreak off of that, which was fake the stretch, fake the counter, and run basically clear outs with some bump and dumps underneath, which we always called jailbreak, even out of the diamond. So the kids kind of already knew some of that. And we also felt like, hey, we've got some receivers now too that are, long, lanky, can win one-on-one. And then we had a couple speedier slot type guys. So it was like, okay, well, we can run one by one and get them ISO'd up. We can even go through wide at times, which we call Raider Longhorn. But so we started to do that. So basically, those were our base plays: was the stretch, the counter, the stretch counter jailbreak, and then we would run just number routes on a tree and just call numbers and run our pass concepts that way. And it kind of started there in 2014, and then in 2015 we started to go no huddle. Now, even though again we had some guys playing both ways, so it can be good and bad. But with the type of offense that we had, I think it was good. We could keep defenses on their heels, so we started doing a lot of that as well, and just kind of fine tuned it a little bit. But really, it's pretty simple once you kind of get the base concepts down. Again, there's only one back, which can be a weakness. Like I was telling you, we started to experiment with having a full back and taking one receiver off the field just to give us some more misdirection, a little more pass pro if we need it. But with the one back, the run game's pretty simple and mostly dive. We run some cross block, some trap, and then sweep. And then we have those pass concepts, just number routes. We could tag our H and our tight end to go out as well. And our H is, like our tight end.
Right. Okay.
And go from there. But that was pretty much it. The first year, I think we ran more traditional tight end, like hand in the dirt, partially because we had two big guys there. And we've kind of done it with different ones, like those guys both did well. They were both, I think I was looking the other day, second team all state behind some Geneva guys who were, really good back when they played six man. But they were more traditional, so we didn't send them out a lot. We were mostly just run blocking and regular pass pro with them. But then we started to have guys that were more hybrids, like maybe our second running back or a guy that's more of a fullback type, and he would play that H position. And we started to back him up off the line just because it became really hard to get a reach block on sweep. Like if we were in Ram strong, and strong just means the running back's on the same side as that H, and we want to run sweep right, every end in six man is taught contain, 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 and they line up pretty wide. And we would work, like, hey, if you can't reach him, just wash him out. And that would work okay sometimes, but by backing him up, and I think I saw Allen Academy do it way back when it was Coach Jolly, I believe, and they did a good job with the H of, if he's off the line, he can almost run to the guy's outside shoulder. And since he's set back, he's got a better angle. So we played with that. And we started to even go, hey, what if, especially against the three-man front, what if we send our center away, send the H first inside, and now we're actually leaving the play side in for the quarterback. So we had to get Cleve like, hey, you got to block, and so that's something that he really learned and bought into, because you can't run that version of sweep very well if your quarterback won't either get out there and kick him or log him. We would say, if the guy's attacking the mesh, just kind of log him if we're already outside off the pitch. But if he's playing traditional contain, inside shoulder, kick him out, we'll cut it back. And back then they were a little more liberal with the cut rules, now.
I miss those days.
Yeah.
I miss those days so much.
I feel like, you get a crew that lets you do anything you want cut wise.
Yeah.
And you get some crews that it's a penalty anytime you cut somebody. But back then, your quarterback could get out there and cut, and he did a good job of that. So once we kind of got that rolling, we felt like pretty good, because obviously, we were a good passing team and he was a great passing quarterback, but we were able to keep people honest enough, with that run game off of that.
Yeah, the credit to that kid. I still have reoccurring nightmares of a November, it's like Thanksgiving week playoff game. It's 40 degrees and drizzling rain the whole game, and the kid goes like 24 for 28 passing the ball. And just, what? I mean, yeah, credit to that kid. I see how that would sort of lead to a philosophical shift in what y'all were doing offensively. Because I guess in my mind, when I think of y'all, I think of like y'all's Ram stuff, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's 1-by-1 receivers, and that's your off the ball H. And then
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, strong or weak depends on determines where the running back is. If I'm hearing you right.
And then if we go gun, the running back's in the back. But typically we'd run it, strong. Just regular Ram would be tight end on the right, or H on the right, running back on the quarterback's left. And then if we go Lion, they both switch places. And then if we go strong, they're both on the same side.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then also with defense, it kind of limits, the looks we would get, because one thing, if we try to dabble in some tight, but you get so many looks, you almost got to like marry it, you can't date it. So it's like, man, we have all these receivers, like we want to be spread. Um, but we do want to be able to run the ball and do some different things compared to diamond also, where sometimes you run 20 yards and you gain 4, that kind of deal. So this will keep us on schedule, and it gets a little predictable of what the defense can do. We always felt like they can either play a 2-2 box, and then you got one-on-one on the outside, so you should have good opportunities there. They can play 2-3-1, and then you should be able to run, especially if your quarterback will lead block on sweep or on lead. We started to run some lead with the quarterback leading through the middle, basically blocking dive up front, just base fan blocking. And then if you get like a 3-man front, dive's kind of dead at times depending on the angles, but we can still run some sweep, and obviously we can throw too, because it's probably a 3-1 with basically one-on-one on the outside, unless you've got a safety kind of trying to play a halfback or safety type of deal. So we felt like, hey, by looking at the box, you're only going to get a few different looks. Obviously, if you get a one-man front, you should be able to run it. Now if it's you guys' dime, it makes it tough because you got guys flying in and all that sort of thing. I get how that's a tough block, especially for those receivers. But we felt
It's a
like
great plug, by the way. Thank you for that.
oh yeah, no, that's tough. But by and large, you can get predictable looks of, hey, here's what they're going to do. If they start bringing the house, we can jailbreak, bump and dump, whatever it might be. And even pass pro, it kind of evolved. At first, we were sort of big on big, in 11-man terms, like center kick, get the end, you kick, and you've got the other end. But again, with those ends wide, that's tough for the center. And we were getting some high lows. The running back would come cut the guy while the center's blocking him up high. So we started to go more just gap protection. So the center goes to the H's side, whichever side the H is lined up, he's going to kick and take that side. And the running back's responsible for the first guy off the center's hip to the weak side. So sometimes the center almost doesn't have anybody, but then he can go help where he needs to help. If they send a backer, if it's a 3-man front, you got the guy right in front of you.
Right.
And nobody really brings more than 3, because then, you're leaving yourself so open on the back end.
Right. And like this, you might have to sort of, as a tight coach, something I've always sort of struggled with spread offenses is like a foundational play, right? Like when you play us, like we're going to put power in the first day and we're going to put our boot in, right? But I'm curious, like how in this type of system, is there a play or, a certain concept that y'all see as like, okay, we hang our hat on this?
Yeah, I mean, run game wise, I would say probably sweep, especially once we started getting the multiple different ways to block it. So now it looks a little different to the defense, but it's the same thing for us. It might look more like a lead one play, and it might go all the way to the sideline another play. So yeah, I would say sweep. And then just being that we ran it so much in diamond, and the kids in middle school, we still ran a lot of diamond, just because it's a fun middle school offense. So they all know jailbreak. So that's always kind of it's almost like the 2-3-1. Like it's a good base in theory. It works great, but in practicality, like Coach was saying that you had on the other time from Gordon Mike Reed, it's like it stops everything, but it stops nothing. If you play a really tough team, you're not going to be able to get away with it. But in some middle school and JV games, we run jailbreak every play, maybe jailbreak crawl, slight variations. But theoretically, we're getting 2 guys deep, 2 guys into the flats, and then 1 guy in the middle. So we're spreading the field and making you cover everything. And if you're second exchanging, which you can or cannot do in Ram, obviously in diamond you always are, but now your quarterback, potentially is hot and he can take off, your spread back. So, I would say sweep and jailbreak, kind of those base, core ones that we hang our hat on. But yeah, funny you said power and boot. I was going to tell you that first year, 2014, we were like, man, that boot is so good and tough, and we were prepared. We had our backside end like slow playing, and first time y'all ran it, he picked it off. The only problem is y'all just ran power over and over, and we didn't stop that.
Yeah, yin and yang, right? Well, I mean, you're bringing up passing game. That's actually where I wanted to go next. I mean, once again, y'all have the ability to go twins. Y'all play a lot of 1-by-1. But, and I heard you mention the number, like the route tree earlier. I guess I'm interested philosophically, your passing game. Do you see it as more of like a concept-based system, or is it more matchup-based? Like if you're running mirrored routes on both sides, or I don't know, just kind of take us through the passing game here.
No, good question. It's more number-based than concepts. We do have a few like jailbreak, or, if we go twins and we want to run flood, and some different things like that. So, bubble. But I think really it just gives you a lot of flexibility with the route tree, where you can pair anything you want depending on what you're getting coverage wise, if there is a safety, if there's not a safety. So, and it's quick. It was really conducive to the no huddle also back when, we were doing that up here when I coached at Gloriedale. We didn't do it as much, but I always liked having it as a change up. And we're thinking about, I know we're going to talk later about practice, but you get so many more reps when you know huddle in practice. Now your defense learns the calls and they're going both ways, so they know, but we go, okay, this series we're on the third call. This series we're on the first call, just ways to dummy call it to keep them guessing a little bit. But it really did help us with that just to get more reps at it. And it's something you can work in the off season, spring a lot too. You don't necessarily need pads on like maybe in tight, you can work it, but you really need to get the bodies out there to really get a lot of benefit from it, especially up front. But for us, we could work that stuff a lot as much as we could and be able to do it. So, I think also you mentioned twins. That was really big in the offense also because now we can run, a screen, we can run bubble, we can have double moves off of that stuff, hots. And depending, I don't know if it's like that when you guys do go spread, but from what we see a lot, if you go twins, they either send everybody over there or they send nobody, a lot of times. So you can run to the twins because nobody shifted or throw it out there because you're 2-on-1, or you go backside because they shifted everybody over to the twins. And so anytime we shifted, if we saw that they just had that end, if he's the only guy outside of your formation to the left, then we would just run sweep, and we had one guy to beat, either kick him out or log him. And he was kind of on an island over there. So anytime that corner went over, if they didn't adjust otherwise, we felt really good about running the ball out of that.
I heard you briefly mention there sort of reading whether it's, one high safety, no high safety, and kind of as we keep sort of diving into how y'all are teaching the passing game, like quarterback reads, is it pre-snap, post-snap? Is he, hey, if it's one high safety, you're looking over here. If it's no high safeties, you're looking over there. Is there any insight you can give into how that works for you guys?
Yeah, probably a mix, honestly.
Yeah.
Especially if we're in 1-by-1, we're probably looking for best matchup, and if it's a safety high and it's something deep, we'd say, hey, look off a little bit, and then go where you want to go, but kind of have an idea. If it's twins, now we're kind of looking more at, hey, what do they normally run? Maybe the flat's dead if they're going to run, like what you guys call your rock and roll stuff, you got to watch, like if a corner's sitting. But we had traditionally run some of that, so the kids kind of knew, like, hey, if we're in twins, the flat might be dead. I've always been more progression than reads in terms of, like, if the corner's here, throw there. I like more like, hey, we're thinking go, but if you look and it's dead, now we're going to our next progression in terms of our receivers as a progression rather than like watch the middle linebacker and then throw off of that because who knows what the other five guys might be doing, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where we've been there. And then again, that's a good thing I think with six-man passing is there's so much room. Like you don't have to worry as much about, all these hook curl defenders and things like that. You may have one or two guys in the middle, but out wide, in some ways you can't truly double team a guy completely unless you want to, just kind of totally be unsound in some other places on defense. So we always felt like if we have a guy that we want to get the ball, we should be able to do it. And then even we played with some motions and some, shifts pre-snap and stuff just to find the matchups that we wanted. But usually we felt like we're at least going to give him a shot. If you have somebody that can cover him when you have a great pass rush, maybe, you're going to make it tough on us. But he should be able to get some opportunities in our offense and what we're trying to do.
You and your career, the passing game has become such a big part of football in general, and you guys have always found a way to win big games against good teams while having passing being sort of part of y'all's, foundation. That's sort of part of who y'all are, right? So I guess a lot of times people say that TAPS, there's a lot more spread than like in the UIL. But regardless, as somebody who's had success at a high level throwing the ball, I mean, do you have any general advice for people out there that say, well, I want to throw the ball, and you're a guy that's kind of been around it a little bit. You got anything for those coaches out there?
It's kind of counterintuitive, but I'd almost say you got to have a run game, and I think about, and also I would say, six man in general, and you guys do a good job of kind of bucking that trend, but I'm sure you've heard coaches say like, well, we just want to force a couple turnovers or get a stop a quarter, but I think taking pride in your defense too, and thinking about how can I put them in a good position. Again, if you don't have the personnel, you probably don't want to go no huddle, throw three incompletions and punt or go for it, in your own zone, like you're not helping your defense. So I always, even though I was an offensive coach and as a head coach, I always thought like I want to help my defense. If there's 2 minutes left, who needs the time? Like I'll give it to the defense because at some point, whether it's weather or again, the opponent has a great rusher or a great corner or backer or a combination of all three, like somebody usually is going to be able to slow your offense down. But if your defense can keep you in it, and then you've got the run game maybe to kind of help them keep you in it, I always felt like that's what really separates the great teams maybe from the very good or the pretty good. So I always thought like, we want to be able to throw and it's fun. And if you have the right mix of guys, go for it. And if you don't, maybe you start small, because again, a lot of times, like even in middle school, we have times we can't throw it more than 20 yards down the field, but we can throw a lot of short stuff. We can throw a slant. We can throw a hot if they're playing way off. We can throw a bubble and just you get easy completions, that's almost like an extension of your run game, but you're creating balance. You're throwing to different guys. You're making the defense defend everything. I can think of a couple games where I didn't love our matchups, but I felt like, hey, we can run the ball. We've got a good defense. So I'd actually come out and throw a couple times on the first drive just to kind of keep them honest and get them on their heels a little bit. And then a couple times we didn't throw much after that. But it's almost like, and even me as a coach, if they're throwing on us first drive, I'm like, defense, hey, what's our coverage? What do we need to do? Do we need to change something? And then by the time you think maybe at the half again, like, wait, they really hadn't thrown it that much since then. But sort of loose softens them up and sort of throw to open up your run game, kind of opposite of typical, run to set up your pass.
So switching gears here, I got a chance. You shared with me some practice plans from way back in the day when you're at Emory, and I'm going to find a way to sort of link that in the description of this video. I'm just curious, like when you get into the district play of your season, how do you go about organizing practice? What are you looking to accomplish? Can you just kind of walk us through that?
Sure. No, it's a good topic and a good question. I think that early in the season, I like to kind of change it up on them. Obviously the coaches, we've got a plan. And I think it was in that stuff that I had sent you. I had a whole calendar. I had everything mapped out way ahead of time. I might shift or, obviously adjust on the fly as you go. But early on, it might be, hey, we're full pads 3 days in a row. And then we're full pads, not for 4 or 5 days and just different things. We're heavy on specials today. Just keeping them guessing. And, you kind of have the time early on, especially back when you could do more 2-a-days and things like that. Like you've got time to get things done and work fundamentals a lot. Obviously that's when I think, from August 1 to September 15 or maybe October 1, you're going to see a big jump in your fundamental growth. Not that you won't after October 1st, but I always felt like once JV's kind of winding down, finishing up their season, it's a lot more schematic and game planning like in district. So then I like to kind of settle into a routine and sort of stick with it. Then the kids kind of knew. So once we hit district, probably mid-October, JV is kind of wrapped up. So we keep some of those guys. Some of them we send to basketball or whatever they're doing for the winter. So our numbers are down a little, so we don't need as much time on the field. Also, I felt like it's a good time to sort of scale back and dial in a little more mentally than physically every day. So it's kind of settling where, being a little different playing Saturdays, I'd break the film down Sunday, our film. Got to have an idea, I'd feel like, of the next team before we get into practice time on Monday. So sometimes, Sunday, Monday were pretty long prep-wise. And then we'd meet as coaches after practice Monday just to make sure. But we had all been kind of watching and talking, off and on. But we would watch our film and then we would go out. We'd do a little conditioning just to, again, get some blood moving, in there. They didn't do anything on Sunday typically. So let's get the blood moving. Let's get going. But we'd watch that film and then we'd come out and it would really be just a little bit of individual, kind of maybe, hey, here's what we need to work on from the game. Here's what's coming up for this week, maybe just a little bit. And we're usually in shirt and shorts, like it's not contact. We're just a lot more talk and walk and sort of teaching, tempo than a hard competitive type of day. And then we'd kind of wrap up with just a little preview of who we're playing that week. So like, hey, this is what Logos runs on offense. Here's their base defense. Here's what we like. Maybe a few plays on air or something like that. And then that's it. And so then Tuesday, we would always go weight room and film. So Monday night, they would get the scouting report and start getting cut up. So we found like, don't send them the whole game. I don't know if you guys are like that, but
Yeah, we are, but it's not a bad point that you're bringing up right now.
So we would cut it up and maybe, something digestible, 50 or less clips and some notes. And so it'd be like, hey, watch this, before tomorrow's practice if you can. And, most do, some, you never know. So we would watch it, though, and then talk through it. So hopefully it's the second time they've seen it. And we started to have one group lifting and one group watching, like skill lifting, linemen. And again, some guys are one on one side of the ball and one on the other, but we divided up equally because they could lift faster, too. And so then we'd flip it. So about 20 minutes of that each side. So we'd get out after about 45 minutes or so, get stretched out, and then we'd go specials. usually like the 2 to 3 that we felt like were going to be most impactful that week. And then maybe a quick run on offense with scout guys, maybe just holding shields or something. We're usually in shells this day, so shorts with shoulder pads. And then our first look at Scout D, kind of just running like their top 10. Like here's the main things they want to do and go. And sometimes by the time we lift and everything, we're only out there maybe, an hour to an hour and a half. And so then they're out. So really, they should be well recovered by Wednesday from Saturday. Mentally, they should be starting to get it. And then Wednesday was kind of our heavy day. So when we did have JV still in their season, sometimes they would practice separate on Tuesdays, but Wednesday we're all there together. We've got scout bodies, if we need them, and we can go and we can do what we need to do. So full pads, straight out after school, no meeting, no film, no nothing. So we would go like inside run and pass skelly, we called it. And again, depends on your numbers, but we were blessed, where we'd have one group doing inside run on one side, like our offense against our scout D look, basically everybody but the corners. And then on the other side, we'd have like 1-on-1 if we didn't have a lot of guys, or 2-on-2 routes, 2 receivers, 2 corners, or a safety in a corner, whatever, with another quarterback. When we have our JV guys, we would usually have enough where we could run a full scout over there also. So we'd have a scout secondary, basically everybody but the D line, and then they're working pass concepts. And we'd flip our quarterback like halfway through, and every now and then be like, hey, we need such and such. He plays in, but he also plays corner,
Yeah.
all that kind of thing. But that got to be really good for us because we could get a lot of reps fast, again, because you're only managing like half the team over here, half the team over there. And I could even float sometimes depending on what was going on and, how many coaches we had. My last year, I had a great staff with Coach Costello, who's, is at Emory now. He was taking the lead on some offensive things and certain packages, so that freed me up a little bit more. I was the first year I didn't coach a position, so like on those Mondays, and I would just walk around doing individual, and kind of talk guys up, or hey, let's work on your stance. Come here, and It was kind of fun, because I trusted them. They'd been with me a while, and it was good stuff. So anyway, we do that, say from an offensive perspective, grab water, come back, do the same thing defensively. So now we've got a scout inside run. So if you're playing against the J, we're basically, that's everybody. But if you're playing against a team that runs spread, everybody but the receivers, but we're just working on the run game against our interior defense. And then on the other end, we're working our coverages against whatever their pass concepts might be. So again, about 20 minutes, water, and then we come back and we might do a special in between there just to get that in, work any kicks and give everybody a little breather, honestly, too. And then we go a lot of team. And I like to do a good amount of team. Like if it goes 20 or 30 minutes, sometimes I'm like, we need it. We need to see it, Looking at defensively, especially, what did we have a little trouble with that first look yesterday, maybe on Tuesday? What do we really need to hit on today? And does it look different with more contact, obviously, too? And we would do things to try to give our scout an advantage sometimes, like they don't have to snap the ball. They can put it on the guy's back, and just just different things to even it up a little bit. But that was really our heavy work day was Wednesday. So after that, we felt like we should have a pretty good idea of what's going on. A lot of times I felt like we could play Friday if we're doing what we need to do by Wednesday. Thursday, a lot of times we go in the morning if JV had a game in the afternoon. But either way, we do like a light lift because we always made sure we were lifting twice a week no matter what, like all the way through state. Like there was we don't have time to lift, or I know it's the easiest thing, to kind of say, no, we got to hit the field. But we felt like from a strength perspective, but more importantly, and especially later on from an injury prevention perspective, we always made sure to get it. And so Thursday might be like a stretch and a circuit, depending on if we got a lot of guys banged up, it might be like yoga. Like we did different things to kind of keep them engaged. So Thursday would be that, maybe a little bit of film too before we head out, just to kind of, hey, this is the second playlist, of the week and whatnot. But then we'd get out and we'd hit some specials, and then really kind of like Tuesday, just a quick offensive and defensive team. Again, because especially when we're going in the mornings, it's like we got maybe an hour and a half and they got to get ready to go to school. So a lot of that. And situations, though, is Thursday where we kind of get into a little more, okay, here's what they like in the red zone, or here we're looking backed up, a little bit of that kind of thing. Third down, here's what we're thinking. And it's almost like a prelude into Friday, which I'll tell you about. But so we hit that. So kind of a light day, honestly. And again, at this point in the season, if I'm them, I'm probably thinking I really only got to practice really, really hard on Wednesday physically. You know what I mean?
Right.
If I'm dialed in, coach is not killing my legs all week. It's like you want a racehorse to run on Saturday. You can't treat him like a plow horse all week, And if we were doing well contact wise too. If we felt like we're not physical enough in the games, then certainly, we would turn it up in practice. But as we got to be more veteran led, it was like, hey, I don't want to get anybody banged up. We're in a good spot. Let's just keep hard thud on Wednesdays, and we hit the ground every now and then. Well, I said we'd rather have to pull you back a little than kick you to go, but we didn't want people getting blindsided and all that kind of stuff, at that point of the season. So then we go into Friday, and it will just be kind of like traditional walkthrough. I know some people are starting to do their science where, if you do a little more 24 hours before,
Yeah. Yeah.
always shirt and shorts. Let's just keep it short. And we had to get off by Shabbat, which is like Jewish Sabbath anyway. So by sundown, they had to be out. So it wasn't really a big deal early in the season, but once the time change happens,
Ooh.
it was like, all right, 5:15 or so, we got to
Huh.
be getting ready to go home. So we would go straight out, but really just a little individual. Again, let's see, like maybe somebody didn't master what we've been working on this week, like last chance to maybe kind of just from a fundamental perspective, get it together. So we hit some individual on both sides of the ball. And again, it's kind of teaching tempo, it's short and shorts for the most part. And then a lot of situations like 2-minute drill, we started to do something, and I've seen it called like kick the field or play the game script.
Yeah, I've
And
heard
I
of that.
couple scripts where it'd be like, all right, coin toss, we won the toss, we're going to kick off, go. And then, all right, scout D for a series. And sometimes we'd wait and see, like if scout broke one, then we'd be like, okay, PAT block, go. Scout's going to kick a PAT, and then we're going to go kick return. And then we're going to run offense, for a drive. Okay, we scored PAT. Or, if we didn't do well, then all right, punt, like we need to work it just in case, so if we went 3 and out or something, and sometimes we would manufacture it, like we break one, oh, we had a hold, come on back, to make sure we got every situation that we wanted to hit, for that week. But it was kind of cool. It kept the kids guessing. We usually have somebody up on the clock, like a manager, just kind of, especially toward the end, to help us work. Like, hey, it's a minute until the half. We got one timeout. We're going to run the clock. Let's see what we can do, and just things like that. I think that kind of kept it fresh and fun. And then hopefully by the end of that, we're about ready to go. So we'd break, and then, they make it one more playlist Friday night, or just, hey, watch the playlist if you haven't, and then go from there. We did some other stuff too, like we run every now and then, like a quiz off of the scouting report, like a Kahoot or something, like the captains would make it, and then they do it and see, who doesn't know anything, who knows everything.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, that was kind of our week, in a nutshell. And then we play Saturdays, and if we played Thursday, it was a little bit different. It was nice because you got a lot more prep time, but typically it got to be, especially when TAPS, we used to be able to do the Saturday to Thursday, but then TAPS kind of put a nix on that. I forget what year, but then it got to be where if you play Thursday, now you got to kind of play Thursday again, unless you've
Right.
got to bye and get back on the Saturday cycle from there.
So, kind of one of my passion projects this off season has been like group sessions, right? Because everybody's going to run team and everybody's going to run indie. And, you mentioned your Skelly and your inside run. And I guess my question is there one of those group sessions that you feel like y'all just couldn't do without? You feel like it was really valuable to your team? I don't mind if it's inside run or Skelly, if there's something else that you guys do, but can you talk about, I guess, your favorite group session?
Yeah, that would probably be it. I mean, we've done
Yeah.
other things, circuits for special teams and stuff to work. Like we'd have, where you're just avoiding like first wave, you're engaging. We had a drill where you go across the field. Actually, I'd have to draw it up for you, but you avoid, then you shock and
Yeah.
slingshot, we call it, then you wrap, and you get a lot of reps in a short time. So there's some good ones out there tackling circuits and things, but probably that inside run and pass Skelly, because it felt like we could, one, if you don't have many coaches, you only need two even to run it. We had more, but if you only have two, like you can run it and you can get more eyes because you're not having to watch the wideouts if you're on inside run. You're not having to watch D line, O line. You can get more reps. You're not going to take a sack where you're like, hey, we want to work our secondary, let them throw, that kind of deal. So I felt like that really helped us, and I think it just gave everybody a little bit more of a specialized. It's almost like you're getting some individual there, but you're getting it against somebody else live.
Right. Yeah.
And
More
especially
game like.
yeah, more game like, but in a little bit of a throttled back, tempo in terms of, we can stop and we can teach a little bit because again, we don't have like 10 guys we need to rotate in because a lot of them are on the other end getting work too. So we really like that a lot, and then just getting a good scout look too is huge. And the more guys you have, the better chance you have to be able to do that. So I've always had, I think even here at Glory Day, I always had at least 15 guys. And so it's always hard when I hear people have like, 8, and it's like, man, you just got to work a lot of half line or you got to go on air. But if you can motivate those scout guys, we do scout player of the week and just different things like that, to make them feel valued, because again, everybody has a role and all those roles are important. So that helped those sessions to be, more productive for us.
Well, you just brought up Gloria Deo, and I meant to ask you about this. Is there any, I guess, any evolution in your philosophy when it comes to practice, going from a situation at Emory, which is probably a pretty big, a pretty unique situation in the world of six man, to where you're at now, where, I would say most teams kind of fall under the roster size y'all have. Has that affected your philosophy towards practice at all?
Uh, and here I was assisting also, so I was running the
True.
offense.
That's true. Yeah.
But a new coach to six man, so we really worked in tandem a lot. And Coach North, he's great. Coaches now still and runs they're called North Star now, the homeschool group. But very similar, I would say. He was bigger on contact, so it would be full pads till Thursday, and we played Fridays. So that's a little bit different.
Yep.
But in terms of structure and stuff, I'd say with less guys, more of or less of that inside run past Skelly and more just kind of doing it in team, because that was kind of the best look. But as we got bigger, like the first year we were like 17, I think, and then we got to be where our last year we had almost 30. So we did have a JV and we were able to do some more things. So I would say, nuts and bolts, like, yes, different, but same kind of philosophies and concepts, a little more country and a little more like, I'm gonna say hard nosed, because again, Emory, we had some tough kids too, but just different.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
we came here, I've even sent people pictures. We practiced on like a pasture, and it was like that thick, rough grass that like pokes you when you fall, and there were rocks out there. And I was like, man, at Emory, the kids would have filed a lawsuit immediately and said, we're not practicing out there, like, what are we doing? But it was a little bit of like Dylan to Dylan East, if you've seen the show Friday Night Lights. Totally different. But again, like the kids wanted to work and they wanted to get better. They didn't have a ton of experience, but they were pretty tough. And again, they would do what we asked them to. So it was kind of neat just, to do it somewhere new and to just see the parallels and to see the differences too, and kind of just embrace it and have fun with the different challenges.
Take this question where you want to, but just kind of curious, y'all's offense, like one of the things that makes the inside run Skelly work so well is how sort of segmented your offense can be. Like those two things can work independently of one another. You know what I mean? Does that affect when you actually get into your team session? You already ran dive and you already ran sweep and inside run. Are you still coming to team and sort of running those same concepts you already worked on?
Yeah, no, interesting that you asked that, because we would sometimes it'd be like, hey, we already ran dive. Our second group ran dive. Even our backup quarterback just ran dive sweep, our base runs, and we don't have that many. And so then we would kind of say things in team where, hey, everybody's involved. Maybe we've got a motion. We're bringing in a receiver to lead or something like that, things where we need everybody. But, we wouldn't really need to run a lot of ISO routes in team. We felt like either maybe a little just to get our pass pro, worked on, but it was more maybe game plan concepts for that week, or things where we're sending linemen out on pass route, an H out or a center out also. So, no, definitely, I think you kind of get rid of that sort of elementary base stuff. You're still repping it and staying sharp, as the season goes on, but you can get into more of, hey, this is game plan wise what we want to do, or hey, we need to run this in twins, but I want to see it with the running back and I want to see it with our line or what have you, on those kinds of things. And same from a scout perspective, I think that, hey, the D line just saw all this stuff. The linebacker saw it. Let's maybe work some sweep because we want to make sure our corners are coming in fitting right, or what have you. But I think it definitely cuts down on the reps and the time that you need. Because I do think, there's some teams and just schools of thought where you just kind of, I think it's Tony Holler's a track guy. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Yeah, no, he's a feed the cats guy.
Like, I mean, I've never done that with track specifically or anything, but like overcooking the steak, I think it definitely happens sometimes, where it's like, you just think, well, we just got to keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it. But if it's October 24th and this kid hadn't done it all year, then you just got to roll with them or get somebody else or do something different, So I think trying to find the right balance of that, I think is a big part of coaching and trying to help your team be the best they can be.
Love it. Love it. Switching gears to game planning, coach. Curious. I mean, I've seen some of the game plans that you sent my way, which were really detailed and makes me feel really ashamed of what I've done to throw together game plan stuff before. But I'm just curious, like when you're putting together a game plan for an opponent, I guess what's the main factors you're looking for? What are some things you're considering? Is it scheme, personnel? I know it's a combination of both, but just curious how you would word that.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And those game plans are working just fine, so I don't think you got anything to worry about. But sometimes I probably even overdid it. But like I think I was telling you when we were talking about doing this, I think it helped me to feel secure and prepared because by the time I had enough in my head to write the summaries and kind of know the top personnel, I'd feel like, if I'm sitting there and it's a blank screen and I'm like, I don't know, they run and they pass, the kids kind of talk like, okay, I haven't watched enough. I got to go back and watch until I feel really good about, what it is that they do. And for me, I mean, schematic, I think is my thing was always like, you can't chase too many ghosts. You got to stop their main things and try to make them beat you left-handed, or make them go to plan C. If they can beat you with plan C, then you're probably going to get beat no matter what you do. But if you can take away A and B just by knowing where they're going to be or what they're going to do, I think that's huge. So I always felt like, let's give our kids the best chance to win, whether we got a good team, an average team, whatever. Like, I think as a coach, you signed up to do it, like they deserve your best, So if you do all that and you'll still get killed, don't think, oh, it wasn't worth it. It's like, well, you might have got killed worse if you didn't do it, at least, have some small victories that you can point to and take pride in. So for me, I think, stopping those top plays for sure, but then personnel a lot, I think just looking at their tendencies or, hey, if you push this guy to the left, he doesn't throw well. He's right-handed. Push him left. If we're bringing one rusher, say, I mean, that can make a big difference. And if you just run straight at his sternum and you give him a two-way go, like, hey, you push him to his weak arm, all of a sudden now you can be an effective rusher one-on-one. Just those little tidbits, I think one's not going to save you, but if you add up a bunch of them and over the course of the season, and then the kids start watching and they start learning things. I think I told you we'd have them do the scouting report sometimes, and the captains would kind of lead the way on that. And even, from a self-evaluation perspective, sometimes we would do, not every week, usually just a couple of weeks a year, but we'd have them take a sheet, and while we watched film, they would grade themselves. And I think that was good, just, that they're paying attention. If they don't finish, take it home, bring it back. And it was really just effort, execution, and assignment, plus or minus. That's it. Even if you got your tail kicked every play, if you knew your assignment and you gave effort, you get a 66. I mean, like you should be getting a B or a C, because I never liked it when it was like, well, we graded him out. He's a 48%. And it's like, well, that's not very encouraging to a kid, especially if most of these kids are academic. They're used to getting like good grades in the classroom. Let's meet them halfway and try to build them up. But
Smart.
most of them did pretty well. And the thing we would do the next week, either the week before or the week after, the coaches would grade them. So it's interesting to see sometimes, like, how did this kid grade himself versus how did we grade him? Because every now and then you got a kid that thinks he's a rose, but he's a weed, you know what I mean? Like a sunflower or something, like, he's giving himself an A, and we're like, this week we had you at a 70. And again, maybe a different opponent, but more often than not, though, more times than that happened was the kids maybe really hard on themselves, and we're like,
Yeah.
hey, I had you at a B, and he's like, I gave myself a 60, and it's like, no, you're probably being a little too hard on yourself, which can not be the best either, So just those little things, I think film can give you those snippets and insights. And to me too, I think the kids, us being close to like Bel Air High and even on the private side, like Episcopal, Kincaid, but I never wanted the kids to feel like, oh, we just play 6-man and blah, blah, blah. I want them to feel like, hey, it's a legitimate program. You're getting preparation. We're going to put the time in to help you be the best you can be. I always felt like that gave a little bit of that, hey, you're not missing something by not going to like a huge school and playing 11-man, because we would have kids that, especially after middle school, maybe I'll go here or maybe I'll go there. I'm sure you'll have it too with Deer Park and different big schools around. But I always felt like, hey, we're going to give you a good amount of prep and we're going to push you and you're going to lift weights and do all these kinds of things, even though you might be a three-sport athlete, so our off seasons might look a little different. But I always felt like that was just something at least to say, hey, that we're treating this seriously and it's a serious thing. Because to me, I mean, I took it like, hey, it's the Super Bowl. I try not to project that all the time on them because I know, they're not going to invest that much time as you are, obviously, as a coach. But I think, they start to take more ownership and you see them really grow and blossom on the mental side of it as well as the physical.
No, that's really insightful. I really like what you're saying about making the kid their football experience feel valuable. I think that's really cool. Talking offensively, your passing game, how much is that changing week to week? Like, is there hey, this team does this, we're going to run a new concept, or hey, we're just going to kind of do what we do? How does the game plan affect y'all's passing game?
Yeah, I would say a good amount because we're always looking at corners and how they're playing. If we're getting off coverage, like I always say, you don't go broke making a profit, and they say, like, as a defensive coordinator, you've probably heard, like, just make them nickel and dime you and they'll get impatient and do something dumb. but I was always like, don't just keep taking it if it's there. So I think, if you're getting corners playing a mile off, just keep hitting them short until they start to come up. And then, you can make moves based off of that. But obviously,
I can distinctly remember like boundary hitches against y'all. You know what I
yeah.
mean? Sorry,
And
I cut you off. Keep
if you
going.
got a guy that can do something after the catch, though those can turn into big plays. And again, just repping that timing, right? Because it can look ugly if you haven't worked it or you're getting bad snaps. That's one thing in our offense too, compared to Diamond, where maybe, you can pick it up and sometimes, your best plays are a broken play on a second exchange. In Ram, especially if you're trying to run sweep or, a drop back, number route passing, if it's, even if it's deep, by the time, you've picked it up and recovered, it's pretty much dead and it turns into hope for the best. But, I think that definitely looking at what the secondary is going to do. And again, if they had a great corner, a lot of times I would just say we can do something else. Like we don't need to say, hey, we're going to beat them one-on-one, like why? Because one of the things, again, help my defense help with controlling the clock. Again, almost thinking as a defensive coach, but coaching offense is like, let's just not turn it over. That was one thing at Gloria Dale. The first year was like, our defense is pretty good. Our offense, I think we averaged about 40, so we weren't bad, but it was like, we're not trying to get in the shootouts. Like, let's just control the ball. And we always averaged, I think all 3 years, less than one turnover a game, and sometimes much less. We had one game we fumbled 4 times, which was rough, but that was like half for the season. It was a mud game, and it was just, kind of an anomaly. But we always just made like protect the ball. And, you run the ball, you go forward. Worst case, if you get 3 or 4 yards, we keep moving the chains. Like a lot of times if you look at drives, probably you guys too, when you get stopped, it's either a penalty or a big loss of yardage play, where you turned it over. Like how many times are you really getting stopped 4 and out when one of those things doesn't happen? Probably not many. So in some ways, it's just don't beat yourself, but obviously if you've got a team that's over aggressive, then I was going to say that when I was talking Ram is, tough things to see. I felt pretty good against a 2-3-1 or like a 3-1 box, but a good 2-2, or we started to get some teams that would put 4 guys up on the line. And it's kind of feast or famine, but Tribe was really good at it, with Coach Goldman was a couple of them are dropping or one of them's manning the H, and they've got different things they're doing, but it kind of kills dive. It's tough to run sweep. So you kind of got to make them pay from a passing game perspective. Or if you can second exchange. And that's one thing we started to get more into. And Coach Costello, I'll give him big credit for that when he came over. I guess being from 11 man, I thought second exchange was just sort of like, hey, give it to your good athlete and just let him go. I mean,
Oh,
give him some pointers, right? And that's still some of it, but he kind of helps being that he played 6 man and played quarterback and was in it for so long, was like, hey, a couple little things I think we can do to help. Like Leo Gerst, for example, was number 4 in the last you guys played. He got really much better at that his senior year of just being able, he had a strong arm the whole time, but just the decision making and one last check before we decide to run or utilizing the pump fake, just those little things can really help. And if you're getting that 4-man look, you kind of need that, or again, you got to be able to go over the top because they would play press man on the outside too. So it was like, man, I can remember some JV games in particular where we're not going to stop the O'Brien, like they're going to score, but let's at least make it close. So we started to hit some deep stuff because it's like we can't run it, we can't really dump because they're sitting right there on that. But it's kind of feast or famine if you catch them with like a seam up the middle or something on the outside. We had a big receiver that we threw a couple posts or goes or something to, but that can be tough. So you definitely need to have that in your back pocket going into the games.
so Coach, we're going to jump into a game now that I call the depth chart. I'm going to give you 3 options, and you're going to have to rank them in terms of the importance to this portion of your offense.
Right.
Okay, so Coach, we've got a good understanding of your base schemes, right? We sort of understand what you guys are trying to accomplish, and you've mentioned some of this, but you guys also have sort of this auxiliary part of your offense, right? So I'm going to give you, just from kind of my memory and my film study, 3 sort of auxiliary portions of your offense, and I want you to rank them off of how you see them as important to y'all's overall, mission of moving the ball and scoring, okay? So your first one here is, like you were just talking about, second exchange offenses. The second one is 3 wide receiver formations. And the third one is screen scheme. So I'm not talking about like your chunk and dump type of stuff. I'm talking about more organized, what I would call jailbreak, but it's not y'all's same word for jailbreak. So one more time, that's second exchange, 3 wide receiver formations, and then your sort of traditional slip screen type of offenses. How would you rank those for y'all?
Gotcha. I would go second exchange number one, even though we didn't major in it. But again, to have it, that threat of having it, and we really saw that it could make us more dynamic when we did. Second, I would say probably the screen game, because again, a lot of things you can do there between hots, bubbles, screen, bubble and go, different looks off of those things. Even tailback screen, that was one thing, if they're bringing the house, we used to run a lot of middle screen, especially I felt like people got better at sitting on it. We tried it here at Gloria Dale a couple times, but back in the old, like the 2015 to 2020s, I feel like people would just bring three hard. So our running back would just kind of bump and turn around, sort of replace where the ball's at, and our quarterback would just take an extended drop and just right over the top, and our center and our H are just kind of give him a shot and go. So he's got two lead blockers. But anyway, I put screen second, and then third, I'd say three wide. It can be a good weapon, and we've used it some, but I really like having that H in there just to give you a little more of threat in the run game. I feel like with three wide receivers, there's only, a couple run plays you can run. So I tended to favor more toward having that H, because then he can still be that third receiver, even though he doesn't line up there, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I guess my follow up to this would be, these are all things that are related to what y'all do, but they have their certain flavor. They need their own certain attention. So how do you go about practicing these things enough to where you can run them efficiently while also getting really good at your base stuff? Like, how does that work into y'all's overall practice structure?
Yeah, I think kind of like we were talking about with inside run and pass skelly, they can work some of those screens, out wide on pass skelly, but some of the middle screens and stuff, that's definitely ones I would save for team. Like we need to rep this with a good scout rush. We need to make sure that the scout is not trying to be, we call them scout team hero, like, and they know the play. And so then they're not biting like they normally would, so we can run our screen. But yeah, I think repping those in team a lot. And again, that second exchange piece was something that, again, I thought, it's just, when in doubt, like, the panic button, give it to your best athlete and just kind of get out of the way. But giving him a few more things, and Coach Costello and those guys working with him one-on-one more during those individual times, like we may have him pull them aside and I take the other drop back quarterbacks or whatever, just to be able to work some more of that. And just, it's almost more mental than physical, I feel like from a spread back perspective on some of that decision making stuff. I think breaking it down and doing it when it's not fully live then helped them to be able to do it when we were live. And then same thing here, when we kind of, I felt like kind of hit the wall offensively toward the end of my second year. Like we know the base stuff, we're decent at it, and we're kind of good at a lot of things, but not great at anything. And I was like, we've got to, I think, have that second exchange. And then that power run game I was telling you about kind of helped us too. But we had two guys that were both pretty good, and one just got a lot better at being able to really increase his speed, I'd say. And he was already tall and lanky. So once he became a second exchange threat, because our back was pretty good at it, but once he got to be that too, it's tough if you've got two guys back there, that can do it well and that feed off each other, and just that timing of kind of knowing where he's going to be. Just imagine if you've got a gun set and you've got two rushers. A lot of times I would tell the up back, hey, block the fast one. He can take, because for some reason, when they see a bigger, strong kid, like I got to block him. I'm like, no, let him go. Our spread
Yeah.
back can beat him all day. You take the fast guy, and just kind of developing that feel of how long to block him before I peel off. Like, okay, he's running, just keep blocking him. Or, hey, you're starting to lose the block, now peel off. And, it's hard. We used to always err toward the side of block, then release, because else they just want to give, I don't know if you guys have had, they give them like the drive by where they're almost like speeding their rush up. They're like a turnstile. They're just kind of slapping them on the back as they run by to tackle our spread back. But like, give them a good 1,001 release, and then that times up really well when our spread back can beat that first guy. And now the second guy's either in no man's land or you're just dumping it right over his head right away. So I think that timing definitely takes a lot of reps, whether it's in a group or a team. We would do also, yeah, if I had to name another drill, we would do just a jailbreak drill, which was
Uh-huh.
sort of everybody but the receivers. And we might start just like 2-on-2, and then little by little, okay, let's add a backer, let's add a center. And then we get to where it was like a 4-on-4, and it's just repping that decision making. And then our rushers get work too,
Yeah.
because we have different calls that they can work, like, okay, we're going to bring our middle backer and peel our ends, or whatever you might have on defense, you can get that work also. So that's another good group drill, I think, that can help you a lot without having to run a full play and receivers are downfield and now they got to come back and you got to huddle up again, or whatever you're doing. I think it saves you time, and you can just rep it a lot in a short time span.
And you called that jailbreak drill?
Mm-hmm.
I
And I
like
think,
that.
I forget who I got it from, but I think I've heard it called like Fox and the Hound.
offense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a squeak off of that. I think we just kind of built from there. And we noticed too in Ram Gun, we're typically, I didn't talk about this, probably should have, but the quarterback is usually at 5, heels at 5, and the running back's toes are even with the QB's heels. And I like them about like fingertip length away. Like, don't be right next to him because it's not going to time up well. But when we would go gun, we used to put him at 7. But as we experimented with second exchange, we're like, it's a little bit better if we back up a little. So sometimes, not enough probably for somebody to catch, but we'd back them up like a yard or so. And that just gave that spread back a little more time. At least the ones we've had the last couple of years, they felt a lot more comfortable when they just had that extra little bit of space. I can remember one playoff week, I think it was in 23 when we were playing BVCU, who was tough, but we were working it and it looked ugly like, the first day. And sometimes that's normal, but it was just like something was off, but we backed them up and they started doing a lot better at it and did it pretty well that week. So we kind of stuck with it.
Which I've really enjoyed this. It's just on top of just being fun to catch up. I've really enjoyed sort of hearing about this unique dead snap offense that you guys have really perfected, at multiple stops. But, as you know, the show is called the Six Man Spotlight. And I feel like it's important that as my mission to sort of give you the spotlight and let you share. I was curious if there's anybody that you want to shine the spotlight on and give a shout out to in your life, your coaching journey, or whatever it may be.
No, sure. I think I'd start with the head coaches that I worked for. Coach Adams at Emory, he's at Tomball Rosehill now and was at Allen. But just, helping me learn the game as I came in was great. And then Coach North, who's up here in Bulverde at Gloria Deo. And again, for him was just being so open of like, hey, I need you to teach me a good amount early on. And then seeing him grow and little by little and now taking it over and running his own homeschool program, that was pretty cool to kind of see that progression. And really all the guys I've coached with, like I said, my last year especially, but my staff that I had with Coach Costello, Kevin Ellis, Javon Martell was my defensive coordinator, and then Otis McElhaney, he's still at Emory. Also, there's just a great staff. Again, no egos, just guys that wanted to get better, help the kids, and have fun and enjoy it. I think that makes it a lot more fun when you have a staff like that. At the time, like, I was trying to think, I think none of us had kids or anything, so we kind of had the time, like to really dive in and just, enjoy it and really soak it up. So that was pretty cool. Also administrators, like Stuart Dow's the head of school at Emory, Angie Gubitz, like they've been there that whole time since they started Six Man, and to see it like grow, and up here, Justine Smith, like I said, we had different challenges up here, fundraising and all that kind of thing that at Emory you didn't really think about. So I think it was Tom Herman said, like teams and coaches win games, but the administration wins championships. And, it didn't work as good at UT, it worked good at U of H, but I get what he's saying, because you can do so much, but you've got to have some support, from the school or the program or, whoever the director of your homeschool program, whatever it might be, you've got to have that support system in place for sure. And then just the players, like sometimes you forget, like you can do all this stuff, but it's them out there making the play, like I can try to take credit for it, say, oh, we schemed this and that, but, it's them that did that. So they always made it super enjoyable and, just always good memories of all the times and places that I've coached. So just to all those players, I got to give them a shout out too.
Yeah, it really is a blast. And, as you were talking there, I mean, you used the word like no ego with your Emory staff. And I hope this comes through in this interview, but I think just your willingness to at Gloria Deo to sort of step into that unique role or, to set Samuel up for success, I think it just jumps off the screen that you're a no ego, you're a humble guy. And I think it's cool that, I'm sure you don't even have to think about that. This is part of who you are, but, I appreciate you and I've really appreciated our friendship over the years. It's been fun to reconnect and I really appreciate you having on the show today.
No, absolutely appreciate it. We missed y'all, when we were gone for a little while, but then again, like it's tough. We always knew if we're playing Pasadena, like, man, but just that consistency, and seeing that y'all do it the right way, like it's fun to watch. And like I said, you doing this, I think it's just awesome for the 6-man community of there not being a whole lot out there. And 11-man, there's almost, too much schematic. If you look something up, you got 100 things and it's, drinking from a fire hose. But with 6-man, there's just a few. So like I said, Travis putting the book out is awesome. You doing these, it's just like great to see, coaches giving back and just trying to help, other coaches get better and to learn in a game that's really nuanced, in a lot of respects. So appreciate you having me again.
Absolutely. Appreciate you, man. Coaches, welcome into the recap. Coach Reimers is a good guy, and I think that came through pretty clearly in our conversation today. Matter of fact, he wanted me to mention to you all to reach out to him with any questions following the interview. So if you have any questions, let me know and I'll get you his contact info. I think he'd be happy to hear from you. I thought that was a fun conversation. I hope you can find some time to get a hold of some film from his time when he was at Emory-Wiener. They were always really sharp on offense, always really efficient. And honestly, whether it be his era, before him with Coach Adams, or even now with Coach Castillo, they just have a long history of being one of the top teams in TAP six-man. And a lot of that starts with just how well coached they are, both sides of the ball, even though today we spent most of the time talking offense. Defense, they've done a great job as well. Their offense has just always stood out to me as being really unique in their approach to moving the ball. And jumping into a recap of some of the highlights of our conversation, personally, I'm immediately drawn to some of his CEO type of thoughts. He obviously led us through a really detailed look at their practice week, but I really appreciate how he sees the game as a head coach. One thought that particularly stood out to me was his idea of using the passing game and the value that it creates in that early unnecessary adjustments in the opponents. Like he mentioned, throw the ball a couple times early, starts getting the other team scrambling, and how you can have more success of what you really want to do, and what they really want to do is run the ball. So I appreciated that. I thought that was a cool thought that I had not necessarily thought about in that particular wording. And, I think that we as a team have been victim to teams doing that to us. And even thinking about our own offense, I think that we have benefited from that without even necessarily understanding what was happening in the moment. So the added clarity that he gave to that, I thought that was neat. And I want to add that into my own bank. And as always, there's probably going to be a couple missed opportunities every time I do one of these interviews. And one that stood out to me is that I wish I would have dug a little bit more into the play calling when it comes to the run game. He briefly mentioned that they have a few different ways to run their sweep play, for example. I wish I could have maybe, once again, just dug into that a bit more. Why do they get into certain adjustments? Why block it this way versus that way? Is it because of, a player on the other team? Is it, what are your kids good at? Obviously, he would say it's a little bit of everything, but I just would like to hear his thought process on how he thinks about that. Blocking adjustments, whether they're running strong, weak, whatever. Once again, good news is that he's a generous sharer of the game, and I think he'd be happy to speak to anybody if you have any follow-ups. So once again, get at me if you want to get in contact with Coach Reimers. And as always, I appreciate you all and your willingness to support this channel and really supporting the game of six-man. If you don't mind, I'd love it if you left a like and a subscription. If you haven't yet, that would be absolutely awesome. And for my Spotify listeners, I admit I don't necessarily know what buttons I would like you to press, but if you can find some buttons that look like they are a good thing, and if you're enjoying the show, I hope that you will press that and express that to the Spotify algorithm. Well, okay, guys, I appreciate you all once again, and I'll catch you next time.